The quest for universal peace took a dramatic turn in the mid-19th century when Baha'ullah's calls for peace were made to kings, rulers, all leaders of church and state to accept the most great peace. These are his resounding words. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security, are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. But their refusal in leading to their downfall would begin a two-stage process destined to achieve peace. The late David Hoffman, who has served for almost 3 decades on the Universal House of Justice, tells us what this may look like from his book, Baha'u'llah, the Prince of Peace. The lesser peace, he says, of this first stage, whose attainment is yet unknown, will greatly promote the most favorable conditions for the necessary transformation of current attitudes, conventions, and assumptions to a world outlook. The huge wave of gratitude and hope which will surge from billions of human hearts when it is recognized that war is really ended, must release such a power into human affairs as no obscurantism, die-hard prejudice, or bigotry could exist. It'll be easy to like our fellow men and to want for them what we want for ourselves, nor will such a resurgence of love be left to evaporate into the air. Mankind's long struggle towards maturity has in itself laid a foundation of world relationships. The lesser peace will inevitably precipitate the reorganization of the world into a single order, organically unified in all the essential aspects of its life, its political machinery, its spiritual aspiration, its trade, its finance, its script and language, and yet infinite in the diversity of the national characteristics of its federated units. But to continue our story, mankind is not there yet, nor even more so when the second stage would arrive at the threshold of the spiritualization, the regeneration, the re-education, and its reorganization, which are the latent jewels of justice in the crown of the most great peace. So, towards those ends in the early 20th century, what Abdu'l-Baha also did in echoing Baha'u'llah's call for peace was to confer with the Central Organization for a durable peace in The Hague. These are some of his words. "Lift up your voices," says Abdu'l-Baha, "and sing out the song of the kingdom. Spread far and wide the precepts and counsels of the loving Lord, so that this world will change into another world, and this darksome earth will be flooded with light, and the dead body of mankind will arise and live, so that every soul will ask for immortality through the holy breaths of God. Soon will your swiftly passing days be over, and the fame and riches, the comforts, the joys provided by this rubbish heap, the world, will be gone without a trace. Be ye loving fathers to the orphan, and a refuge to the helpless, and a treasury for the poor, and a cure for the ailing. Be ye the helpers of every victim of oppression, the patrons of the disadvantaged. In this way, the light of divine guidance will shine forth, and the blessings of God will cradle all mankind. For love is light, no matter in what abode it dwelleth, and hate is darkness, no matter where it may make its nest. O friends of God, that the hidden mystery may stand revealed, and the secret essence of all things may be disclosed. Strive ye to banish that darkness forever and ever. In many passages of his writings, Baha'ullah speaks of the process that must unfold. The great being wishing to reveal the prerequisites of the peace and tranquility of the world and the advancement of its peoples has written, "The time must come when the imperative necessity for the holding of a vast and all-embracing assemblage of men will be universally realized. The rulers and kings of the earth must needs attend it, and participating in its deliberations must consider such ways and means as will lay the foundations of the world's great peace amongst men. Such a peace demandeth that the great powers should resolve, for the sake of the tranquility of the peoples of the earth, to be fully reconciled among themselves. Should any king take up arms against another, all should unitedly arise and prevent him. If this be done, the nations of the world will no longer require any armaments except for the purpose of preserving the security of their realms and of maintaining internal order within their territories. This will ensue and ensure the peace and composure of every people, government, and nation." And Abdu'l-Baha elaborates on its implementation and says, "True civilization will unfurl its banner in the midmost heart of the world whenever a certain number of its distinguished and high-minded sovereigns, the shining exemplars of devotion and determination, shall, for the good happiness of all mankind, arise with firm resolve and clear vision to establish the cause of universal peace. They must make the cause of peace the object of general consultation and seek by every means in their power to establish a union of the nations of the world. They must conclude a binding treaty and establish a covenant, the provisions of which shall be sound, inviolable, and definite. They must proclaim it to all the world and obtain for it the sanction of all the human race. This supreme and noble undertaking, the real source of the peace and well-being of the world, should be regarded as sacred by all that dwell on earth. All the forces of humanity must be mobilized to ensure the stability and permanence of this most great covenant. In this all-embracing pact, he goes on to say, the limits and frontiers of each and every nation should be clearly fixed. The principles underlying the relations of governments towards one another definitely laid down, and all international agreements and obligations ascertained. In like manner, the size of the armaments of every government should be strictly limited. For if the preparations for war and the military forces of any nation should be allowed to increase, they will arouse the suspicion of others. The fundamental principle underlying this solemn pact should be so fixed that if any government later violate any one of its provisions, all the governments on earth should arise to reduce it to utter submission. Should this greatest of all remedies be applied to the sick body of the world, it will assuredly recover from its ills and will remain eternally safe and secure. And to consolidate further these requirements, Shoghi Effendi, in his essay, The Goal of a New World Order, set forth the immediate implications of these councils. What else, he says, could these weighty words signify if they did not point to the inevitable curtailment of unfettered national sovereignty as an indispensable preliminary to the formation of the future commonwealth of all the nations of the world? Some form of a world superstate must needs be evolved, in whose favor all the nations of the world will have willingly ceded every claim to make war, certain rights to impose taxation, and all rights to maintain armaments, except for purposes of maintaining internal order within their respective dominions. Such a state will have to include within its orbit an international executive adequate to enforce supreme and unchallengeable authority on every recalcitrant member of the Commonwealth. Then, towards the close of the 20th century, the Universal House of Justice, the world head of the Baha'i Faith, published a booklet, The Promise of World Peace, that was widely publicized among world leaders. It reads in part, to the peoples of the world, the great peace towards which people of goodwill throughout the centuries have inclined their hearts, of which seers and poets for countless generations have expressed their vision, and for which from age to age the sacred scriptures of mankind have constantly held the promise, is now at long last within the reach of the nations. For the first time in history, it is possible for everyone to view the entire planet with all its myriad diversified peoples in one perspective, World peace is not only possible, but inevitable. It is the next stage in the evolution of this planet. In the words of one great thinker, the planetization of mankind. And towards the end of its message, the House of Justice, referring to Baha'ullah's call for a vast and all-embracing assemblage, made this moving appeal. The holding of this mighty convocation is long overdue. With all the ardor of our hearts, we appeal to the leaders of all nations to seize this opportune moment and take irreversible steps to convoke this world meeting. All the forces of history impel the human race towards this act, which will mark for all time the dawn of its long-awaited maturity. Will not the United Nations, with the full support of its membership, rise to the high purposes of such a crowning event? Let men and women, youth and children everywhere recognize the eternal merit of this imperative action for all peoples and lift up their voices in willing assent. Indeed, let it be this generation that inaugurates this glorious stage in the evolution of social life on this planet. And to continue our story, what came at the close of the 20th century was establishment of the unity of nations as envisaged by Abdu'l-Baha. Thus, the journey continues in hastening the attainment of universal peace as these affirmative words of Baha'u'llah. The call of God, when raised, breathed a new life into the body of mankind and infused a new spirit into the whole creation. It is for this reason that the world hath been moved to its depths, and the hearts and consciences of men been quickened. So, to conclude, quest of universal peace, humanity continues to march forward, knowingly or unknowingly, towards the reorganization of the world in quest of the ultimate crown of justice, that is the most great peace.